My husband betrayed me at dinner and brought his ex along. The Korean mafia boss said, "She's mine." New York City has a way of making you feel small even when you're dressed to kill. I stood outside Per Se at 7:47 p.m. on April 11th, 2024, watching my reflection in the glass doors. Red dress, gold necklace my mother left me, heels that made my feet scream but made my legs look like they went on forever. 4 years of marriage. Our anniversary. Seth had made the reservation 3 months ago, told me to wear something that would stop traffic on Columbus Circle. I should have known something was wrong when the hostess gave me that look. The one that's half pity, half fascination, like she's watching a car accident in slow motion. Seth was already seated. I could see him through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park, the city sprawling below us like we owned it. He wasn't alone. The blonde woman in the black dress sitting across from him had her hand on the table, fingers spread like she was claiming territory. I knew those fingers. I'd seen them in photos Seth swore he'd deleted. Sloan. His ex-fiancée. The one he'd left 3 months before he met me. The one he said was ancient history every time I asked. The one whose name I'd found in his phone 2 years ago under S, work contact. I walked to the table on legs that felt like someone else's. The restaurant was all white tablecloths and soft lighting, the kind of place where people whisper their cruelty instead of shouting it. Everyone was watching without looking. That's how you know you're in a place with real money. The violence is polite. "Imani," Seth stood, kissed my cheek like we were in a movie. "You remember Sloan." I remember thinking, this is how it ends. Not with a fight in our Gramercy Park apartment, not with tears or broken dishes. With salmon and wine and Central Park glittering below us, while strangers pretended not to watch my husband introduce me to the woman who was supposed to replace me. "Of course," I said and sat down. Sloan smiled. It was the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind that says I've already won. "I thought we could all be adults about this," Seth said, pouring wine I didn't ask for. His voice was warm, reasonable, the same voice he used when he was explaining why he'd be home late again, why the charge on our credit card wasn't suspicious, why I was overreacting. Sloan touched his hand across the table. Not a brush, a grip, possession. My wedding ring suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. The sommelier appeared, talking about notes of cherry and oak, and all I could think was, how long has this been planned? The reservation, the dress code, the way Seth kept glancing at Sloan like they were sharing a private joke. I stood up, my chair scraped too loud. 3 tables turned. "I need some air." Seth didn't follow. That's how I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. I grabbed my purse, except I didn't. It was still at the table, next to the napkin I'd barely touched. My keys, my wallet, my phone, everything I needed to disappear was still sitting there while Seth and Sloan watched me walk away. But I wasn't the only one watching. There was a man at the bar. Korean, maybe mid-30s, in a suit that cost more than my car. Tattoo visible at his wrist when he reached for his drink. He'd been there when I walked in, I realized, sitting in the exact spot where he could see our entire table. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at me like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. I didn't know his name yet, didn't know he'd been watching me for months, didn't know that by the time I walked out of Per Se, he'd already decided I wasn't leaving that room as Seth Calder's wife. The skyline glittered behind him, New York City indifferent to my breaking. I kept walking. Before we begin, please subscribe, like, and share. This story is about to take you somewhere you weren't expecting, and you'll want to see every moment of what comes next. The April wind hit me the second I stepped outside. Cold enough to hurt, sharp enough to feel like punishment. I'd left my coat at coat check, Another thing Seth had control of. The receipt was in his pocket. I stood on the corner of Columbus Circle at 8:51 p.m., shaking. Not from cold. From the understanding that I just watched my marriage end over $20 oysters and wine I couldn't pronounce. A black town car pulled up. Sleek, tinted windows, the kind of car that doesn't ask permission. The back door opened. It was him, the man from the bar. "Get in." His voice was calm, almost bored. "He's watching from the window." I looked back. Through the glass, I could see Seth and Sloane, framed perfectly in the restaurant's warm light. They were laughing, actually laughing. I got in the car. Not because I trusted this stranger. Because spite is stronger than survival sometimes, and I wanted Seth to see me drive away in a car nicer than his. The door closed. The interior smelled like leather and something expensive I couldn't name. The man didn't look at me, just nodded to the driver. We pulled away from Per C, and I watched the restaurant disappear behind us. "I'm Kang Do-yeon," he said after 3 blocks of silence. I didn't answer. He didn't seem to need me to. We drove through Midtown, the city blurring past in streaks of light and noise. I should have been scared. Should have asked where we were going, who he was, why he'd been watching me. But all I felt was numb. The car stopped in Tribeca, outside the Four Seasons. Do-yeon got out, opened my door himself, not like a gentleman, like someone used to being obeyed. "You're getting a suite," he said, walking toward the entrance. I followed, because I didn't know what else to do. The lobby was all marble and muted gold, the kind of quiet that only exists when everyone around you has enough money to not worry about tomorrow. The woman at the front desk didn't ask for my ID or credit card. Do-yeon handed her a black card, said something too low for me to hear. She gave him a key. We rode the elevator to the 23rd floor in silence. He walked me to the suite, opened the door, stepped aside. "When you're ready to talk, use this." He handed me a phone, not mine, a burner, I realized. Clean, simple, 1-number programmed. "Why are you doing this?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. He looked at me for the first time since we'd gotten in the car. Really looked. Not the way Seth looked at me lately, like I was furniture he'd gotten tired of rearranging. Do-yeon looked at me like he was solving an equation. "Because your husband is a liar," he said, "and you deserve to know what he's lying about." Then he left. The door clicked shut, and I was alone in a hotel room that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River, king bed with sheets that felt like water, a bathroom bigger than our bedroom at home. Home. I didn't have a home anymore, did I? I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my red dress, and realized I'd left everything at the table. My keys, my wallet, my real phone with pictures of my mother, contacts for my friends, the calendar where I'd marked our anniversary 3 months ago with a heart emoji. Seth had all the power. Except I had Do-yeon's phone. I held it in my hands, staring at the single number programmed inside. No name, just digits. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was insane. That I'd just gotten into a car with a stranger who'd been watching me, who knew my husband, who'd paid for this room without blinking. But the other part, the part that had just watched Seth hold Sloane's hand across a table, whispered, "What if he's the only one telling you the truth?" I plugged the phone into charge and lay back on the bed, still dressed, staring at the ceiling. My marriage ended at 7:47 p.m. Whatever came next started at 8:51. I didn't know which terrified me more. If this moment made you feel something, if you're wondering what a man like Do-yeon wants with a woman whose world just shattered, subscribe now. This story only gets deeper. I woke up at 6:13 a.m. to sunlight cutting through expensive curtains and the sick realization that last night actually happened. I was still wearing the red dress, still wearing the heels. My makeup had smeared across the white pillowcase. Hotel staff were going to hate me. The phone on the nightstand, my real phone, the one I'd somehow grabbed from my purse before leaving it at Purse C, showed 37 missed calls from Seth. None of the voicemails sounded worried. They sounded angry. "Where the hell are you? You're embarrassing yourself. Call me back now." The last one left at 1:47 a.m. "I'm calling the police. You can't just disappear." I sat up too fast. The room tilted. The burner phone buzzed. A text from the only number saved. "Breakfast, lobby." "Don't use your real phone." I should have stayed in the room. Should have called Keisha, my best friend who'd warned me about Seth from the start, who'd told me at my wedding that she'd help me hide the body if it ever came to that. But I went downstairs anyway. The restaurant was quieter than the lobby, tucked in a corner with views of the Hudson. Do-Yun was already there, sitting at a table by the window, reading the Financial Times, in Korean. He looked up when I approached, took in the dress I'd slept in, the hair I hadn't brushed, the face I hadn't washed. Didn't comment. "Sit." I sat. He ordered without asking me what I wanted. Somehow got everything right: coffee with cream, no sugar, eggs scrambled soft, wheat toast, fruit. "Your husband filed a missing persons report at 1:47 this morning," he said, folding the paper. I gripped my coffee cup. "I'm not missing." "No, but he's making you look unstable." He slid his phone across the table, showed me Sloane's Instagram. Posted 4 hours ago, a photo from last night, the three of us at the table before I'd left. Seth and Sloane were smiling. I was caught mid-sentence, mouth open, eyes slightly unfocused. The caption, "Dinner with old friends, 2 hearts." 3,000 likes already. I read the comments. "So cute. Love this energy. Seth looks so happy." Someone had commented, "Where's his wife?" Sloane had replied, "She left early, not feeling well. Red." I felt sick. "This was planned," I said. "Yes." Do-Yun pulled up another screen. Security footage. Seth walking into a law office on Madison Avenue. The timestamp, 3 weeks ago. "Divorce lawyer," Do-Yun said. "He's been preparing." He swiped again. Bank statements. Seth had been moving money. Not a lot at once. 5,000 here, 8,000 there. But it added up. Over 3 months, he'd transferred nearly $200,000 to accounts I'd never seen. "He's leaving you with nothing," Do-Yun said. "The Gramercy apartment is in his name. Your mother's inheritance was in a joint account. He's been draining it." My mother's money. The only thing I had that was mine. I couldn't breathe. "Why do you have this?" I asked. Do-Yun leaned back, hands folded on the table. The tattoo on his wrist was visible now, Korean characters I couldn't read. "Because I've been watching him for 5 months. The restaurant felt too warm." "Why?" He didn't answer. I pushed. "If you wanted to help, you could have warned me." "I needed you to see it yourself." His eyes were dark, unreadable. "Seth Calder doesn't just owe money, he owes me. 2.3 million, and when I came to collect, I found you." Everything went cold. "What does that mean?" Do-Yun stood, dropped cash on the table. $200 for a breakfast that cost maybe 50. "It means you have a choice. You can go back to him. Pretend last night didn't happen. Let him take everything and leave you with the narrative he's building, unstable, jealous, possibly dangerous." He buttoned his jacket, looked down at me. "Or you can let me show you what he's really planning. And maybe, if you're smart, We can both get what we need." He walked toward the exit. I sat there, eggs going cold, coffee bitter in my mouth. My phone buzzed. "Seth, we need to talk." The burner buzzed. "Do-yun, your choice, but make it fast." I picked up the burner. Typed, "Show me everything." Left the real phone on the table and walked out. Do-yun's office was on the 30th floor of a building in Hudson Yards that looked like it was made entirely of glass and steel. The kind of place where people spoke in low voices and everyone's shoes cost a month's rent. We didn't speak in the elevator. Didn't speak walking down the hallway past doors with no names, just numbers. His office was exactly what I expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, minimalist furniture, not a single personal item in sight. No photos, no plants, no coffee mugs with sentimental sayings. He lived like a man who could disappear in 5 minutes. He opened a laptop, turned it toward me. "Sit." I sat. The file was labeled with my married name, Imanicalder. Seeing it in print made my stomach turn. Do-yun opened it. Inside, bank statements, text messages, emails, photos. Seth had been funneling money into offshore accounts for 8 months. The joint account where my mother's inheritance lived. The $800,000 she'd left me after the cancer finally won was nearly empty. "He started moving it last June," Do-yun said, scrolling through statements. "Small amounts at first, then bigger once he thought you weren't paying attention." Last June, I'd been in Chicago for my father's funeral. My dad died 2 months after my mother, and I'd spent 3 weeks there handling the estate, the service, the guilt of not being there when he'd needed me. Seth had stayed in New York, said he couldn't get time off work. Do-yun pulled up photos. Seth and Sloane in the Hamptons. At a hotel in Midtown, the Mark, I recognized the lobby, entering a brownstone in the West Village at 2 in the morning. Every photo was dated, June through April, 10 months of a relationship I'd been too stupid to see. I felt like I was going to vomit. But then Do-yun scrolled further, and I saw photos of myself. Leaving Equinox on the Upper East Side in my gym clothes, walking through Conservatory Garden in Central Park, the place I went when I needed to think. At a gallery opening in Chelsea, I'd gone alone because Seth said he had work. Every photo was time-stamped. Every photo was taken by someone following me. I stood up so fast the chair fell backward. "How long?" Do-yun didn't pretend not to understand. 8 months. "Why?" He closed the laptop. "Because I needed to know who you were before I decided what to do with you." The words landed like a slap. "Do with me," my voice was shaking. "I'm not a thing you get to decide about." "No," he agreed, "but Seth made you one when he used you as collateral." I couldn't process that, couldn't process any of this. "If you wanted to help." "I never said I wanted to help." Do-yun stood, walked to the window. The Hudson stretched below us, boats moving like toys. "I wanted my money, but when I started tracking Seth, I found the contract he signed. The one where he promised your inheritance if he couldn't pay by March 15th. March 15th, 6 weeks ago. He forged your signature," Do-yun continued. "Made it look like you'd agreed to guarantee his debt. It's not legal, wouldn't hold up in court, but it told me everything I needed to know about what kind of man your husband is." He turned back to face me. "And then I saw you, watched you for weeks, saw the way you moved through the city like you were trying not to take up space, saw you buy flowers for your mother's grave every Sunday, saw you eat lunch alone in the park, reading books he probably never asked about." His voice didn't soften, but something in his expression changed. "I realized Seth Calder doesn't just owe me money. He owes you the years you gave him thinking he was someone worth trusting. Silence filled the office. What happens to me when you collect? I finally asked. That depends on what you're worth to him. I laughed. It came out bitter, broken. He brought his ex to our anniversary dinner. I'm worth nothing. Do-Yun crossed his arms. Then you have nothing to lose. If your heart just dropped, if you're starting to understand that this isn't a rescue, it's a deal. Subscribe now. Because what a Manny does next will change everything. I stayed in Do-Yun's office for another hour, while he showed me exactly how deep the betrayal went. Seth hadn't just moved money. He'd taken out a second mortgage on the Gramercy apartment without telling me, had credit cards in my name I'd never opened, had been systematically destroying my financial identity for almost a year. When he files for divorce, Do-Yun explained, he'll claim you were reckless with money, point to the credit card debt, say you emptied the joint account. It'll be your word against his, and he's been building this case for months. I stared at the numbers on the screen. Why would he do this? We were happy. Were you? The question hit harder than I expected. I thought about the last year. The night Seth came home late smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. The way he'd stopped asking about my day. The Christmas when he'd given me a Peloton and I'd cried in the bathroom because I'd asked for a trip to see my family. I thought we were, I said quietly. Do-Yun closed the laptop. He's meeting Sloan for lunch at the Odeon at 1:15. I have surveillance there. I could send you photos that would end their relationship, or I could let it continue. I looked up. Why would I care if they stay together? Because if she thinks he's free, she'll pressure him to move faster. People in a hurry make mistakes. Mistakes create opportunities. He wasn't offering me revenge. He was offering me a weapon. What do you want from me? I asked. Help me find where he hid the money. You have access to his laptop, his office, his safe at home. He trusts you not to look. And if I help you, then I'll make sure you walk away with something. Your mother's money, at minimum. Maybe more if Seth buried himself deep enough. I picked up the burner phone from where I'd set it on his desk, turned it over in my hands. And what do you get? My money back, and the satisfaction of watching a man who thought he was smarter than me realize he wasn't. I should have walked away, should have called Keisha, hired my own lawyer, done this the right way. But the right way would take months, maybe years, and by then Seth would have erased me completely. If I do this, I said slowly, I'm not doing it for you. I don't need you to. Something shifted in the way he looked at me, not like I was collateral anymore, like I was a person making a choice. What do I do first? I asked. Do-Yun pulled out his phone, sent me a text. Photos of Seth and Sloan at the Odeon, the address of his divorce lawyer, bank account numbers I'd need to match to statements. Go home, he said. Play the role. Make him think you're sorry, that you overreacted, that you're willing to forgive him. And then you search everything. Send me photos of anything that looks remotely financial. Passwords, account numbers, meeting notes, anything. I stood. My legs felt shaky. He'll know I went through his things. Not if you're careful, and not if you do it while he's asleep. The thought of crawling through Seth's office while he slept in our bed made me want to scream. But I nodded. Do-Yun walked me to the door. Imani. I turned. If this gets dangerous, if he suspects, if he threatens you, you call me immediately. Don't play hero. Men like Seth are only charming until they're cornered. I wanted to ask what happened when men like Do-Yun got cornered, but I didn't. I took the elevator down alone, walked out into Hudson Yards at 11:52 a.m. The city moved around me like it didn't know my life had just been divided into before and after. The burner phone buzzed. "Do-yeon, you're stronger than he taught you to believe." I didn't respond, but I didn't throw the phone away either. I went home at 3:33 p.m. I'd spent the hours in between sitting in Conservatory Garden, the place I always went when I needed to breathe. The tulips were blooming, families were laughing, and I was planning how to lie to my husband's face. The Gramercy apartment looked exactly the same. Exposed brick, hardwood floors, the art Seth had chosen without asking my opinion. I'd loved this place once. Now it felt like a cage with nice furniture. Seth was there, packing, phone in his hand. When he saw me, his face did something complicated. Relief mixed with rage mixed with calculation. "Where the hell have you been?" I'd practiced the lie in the park. I stayed at Keisha's. "You didn't answer your phone." I turned it off. I needed space. He crossed the room fast. For a second, I thought he might grab me, but he just stood close, looking down at me like he was trying to read a language he'd forgotten. "You embarrassed me last night, Imani." Not an apology, an accusation. I swallowed every word I wanted to scream. "I'm sorry, I just wasn't expecting Sloane." The name tasted like poison. Seth softened. He actually softened, like he'd won something. "I should have warned you," he said, touching my face. "But babe, we're adults. She's part of my past, but you're my future." I didn't pull away. It took everything I had not to pull away. "I know," I whispered. He kissed my forehead. "Let's go away this weekend. The Hamptons, just us. We'll reconnect." I nodded like a puppet. That night, he wanted to have sex. I let him. Closed my eyes and thought about the photos of him and Sloane, the bank statements, the way Do-yeon had looked at me like I was worth saving. When it was over, Seth fell asleep immediately. He always did. I waited until his breathing was steady, until the clock said 4:47 a.m. Then I got up. His office was at the end of the hall. I knew the desk was always locked, but I also knew he kept the key in his gym bag because he thought I'd never look there. The bag smelled like the cologne Sloane had probably bought him. I found the key under his protein powder. The desk was organized chaos, contracts, bank statements, a notepad with passwords scrawled in his terrible handwriting. I photographed everything with the burner phone, hands shaking, breath too loud. Then I found the second phone, tucked in the bottom drawer under old tax returns. A burner, just like the one Do-yeon had given me. I opened it. Messages with Sloane going back to June. Plans to finalize everything by May. Jokes about me, about how clueless I was, how easy this would be. One text from 3 days ago. "After this weekend, it's done. She'll never see it coming." I took photos of everything. Sent them to Do-yeon's number. Put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Got back in bed at 4:59 a.m. Seth rolled over at 6:30, kissed my shoulder, completely oblivious. "Morning, babe," he murmured. "Love you." I said it back, and hated myself for how easy the lie was. If you're realizing that survival sometimes means losing yourself, subscribe now, because the cost of playing this game is about to get higher. We left for the Hamptons at noon on Saturday, April 14th. Seth drove, one hand on the wheel, the other on my thigh like everything was perfect. The house belonged to his business partner, someone I'd met twice at parties where everyone drank too much and said too little. It was in Amagansett, white walls, ocean view, the kind of place that looks peaceful but feels empty when you're the only ones there. Seth was attentive in a way that felt performative, opened my car door, carried my bag, made reservations at Nick and Tony's for 7:30. "This is what we needed," he said, unpacking wine in the kitchen. Just us. I smiled and thought about the photos on the burner phone. We spent the afternoon on the beach. Seth took photos of me in the sundress he'd bought without asking my size. Posted them on Instagram with the caption, "My beautiful wife. Lucky doesn't cover it. 2 hearts." The comments poured in. Everyone said we looked happy. Dinner was worse. He ordered for me, got everything wrong, talked about work for 40 minutes straight, held my hand across the table like we were newlyweds. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen, face tightening. I need to take this. He stepped outside. I watched through the window. He was arguing with someone, gesturing sharply, voice too loud for it to be work. When he came back, he said it was nothing. I didn't believe him. That night, I woke up at 2:22 a.m. The bed was empty. I found him downstairs in the office, laptop open, transferring money. His face was lit by the screen, expression tense. He didn't see me watching from the hallway. I took a photo with the burner phone. Went back upstairs. Morning came too bright. Seth was cheerful again, but there was an edge to it. We should head back early, he said over coffee. Something came up. We drove back to the city in silence. He dropped me at the apartment, said he had a meeting. I knew he was meeting Sloan. The burner buzzed the second he left. Do-Yun, he just withdrew $300,000 in cash. He's running. Me, when? Do-Yun, soon. Days, maybe. I sat on the couch in the empty apartment and realized, if Seth disappeared, I'd be left with nothing. No money, no proof, no way to prove I hadn't been complicit. Do-Yun, I can stop him, but you need to trust me. Me, I don't trust anyone. Do-Yun, smart. Then, meet me at Conservatory Garden at 6, alone. I stared at the message. Thought about Seth, about Sloan, about the life I'd built that was never really mine. Typed, I'll be there. Conservatory Garden at 6:07 p.m. was quiet in a way that made everything feel fragile. Tulips blooming, families leaving, the city noise distant like it was happening in another world. I sat on the bench where I always sat, the one near the fountain where nobody bothered you if you wanted to be alone. Do-Yun arrived at 6:11, sat beside me without speaking. For a long time, we just sat there. Finally, I need to tell you something. I didn't look at him. Okay. Seth didn't borrow money for business. He gambled it. The words hung in the air. There's a poker game. Underground, Koreatown, high stakes, I run it. I turned to look at him then. Seth came last November. Lost $40,000 the first night. Kept coming back, kept losing. By February, he was $2.3 million in the hole. The number didn't feel real. He promised he'd pay by March 15th, then April. Then he started making other promises. Do-Yun's voice was steady, but his hands were tight on his knees. He offered you as insurance. Said if he couldn't pay, I could collect from your inheritance. He forged your signature on a contract. The garden tilted. That's when I started watching you, Do-Yun continued. I needed to know who I was dealing with, if you were complicit, if you knew what your husband was doing. And I realized you didn't. I realized he'd been lying to you about everything. And I realized... He stopped. What? Do-Yun looked at me then, really looked. That he doesn't deserve what you gave him. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was a confession of anger on my behalf. Why do you care? I asked. Because I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, but I've never broken someone who didn't break me first. Silence. The fountain kept running. The city kept moving. Let me protect you, he said quietly. You mean own me? No, he shook his head. I mean choose you. The difference landed like a weight in my chest. You've been watching me for 8 months, I said. Taking photos, following me, that's not protection. You're right. It started as business. But somewhere between November and now, it stopped being about Seth and started being about making sure you survived him. I didn't know if I believed him. But I knew I believed he meant it. What happens now? I asked. Now we confront him, together, and we make sure you walk away with everything he tried to take. I thought about Seth's face at Percy, about Sloane's hand on his, about 10 months of lies I'd been too trusting to see. Okay, I said. Do-Yun stood, offered me his hand. I took it. Seth's office was in Midtown, one of those glass towers where everyone wore $1,000 suits and smiled with their teeth, but never their eyes. I'd been there twice, once when he first got the job, once for a Christmas party where I'd stood in the corner while he networked. Do-Yun and I walked in at 11:33 a.m. on April 15th. No appointment, no warning. The receptionist tried to stop us. Do-Yun just looked at her. She sat back down. We found Seth in his office. Sloane was with him, sitting on the edge of his desk, laughing at something on her phone. They froze when they saw me. Imani, Seth stood. What are you? I put divorce papers on his desk. Sign them. Seth laughed, actually laughed. You can't be serious. I know about the money, I said. The gambling, the forged contract, the $300,000 you withdrew yesterday. His face changed. Panic, then anger, then something like calculation. You don't know what you're talking about. I put my phone on his desk. Screenshots of every transaction, every text message, every lie. Try again. Sloane stood. I should. Sit down, I said. She sat. I looked at Seth. You sign the papers, return my mother's money, and I walk away quietly, or I take everything to the police and you lose more than money. Seth moved fast, grabbed my wrist, hard. You think you're smart. His voice was low, dangerous. You think you can threaten me. The door opened. Do-Yun walked in with 2 men, tattoos visible, silence like violence. Do-Yun didn't say a word, just looked at Seth's hand on my wrist. Seth let go immediately. Sign the papers, Do-Yun said quietly. Who the hell are you? Seth demanded. The man you owe $2.3 million, and the man who's decided she's worth more than your debt. The office went still. Seth looked between us. His hand was shaking when he picked up the pen. You're making a mistake, he said. No, I replied. I already made it 4 years ago. He signed. Do-Yun collected the papers, handed them to one of his men. The money transfer happens today, all of it. Her inheritance plus interest. If it doesn't, I'm not coming back to talk. They left without another word. I stood there staring at Seth, at Sloane, at the life I'd almost let destroy me. Imani, Seth started. Don't, I said. Don't say my name, don't call me. Don't come to the apartment. You have 24 hours to move your things out. I walked to the door, stopped. And Seth, she's welcome to you. I hope you're worth the $2.3 million. Sloane's face went pale. I didn't wait to see what happened next. If your heart is racing, if you need to know what happens when the dust settles, subscribe now. Because there's one more chapter and it changes everything. 3 days. That's how long it took for Seth to transfer every penny. My mother's $800,000, his debt to Do-Yun, and another $200,000 in what Do-Yun called damages. The divorce was filed, the separation agreement signed, the Gramercy apartment went up for sale. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt unmoored. Like I'd been walking on a floor that turned out to be glass, and now I was falling through air I couldn't see. Do-yeon texted on April 18th, "Dinner, my place, 8 p.m. Not a command, an ask. I went. His penthouse in Tribeca was different than his office. Warmer. There were books on the shelves, Korean literature, philosophy, books about art I'd never heard of. A record player in the corner. A photo on the bookshelf of a woman holding a little boy's hand. He didn't explain it. I didn't ask. Dinner was Korean food he'd cooked himself. Careful, precise, nothing rushed. We ate in silence for a while. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "You decide." I set down my chopsticks. "You've been deciding for me since we met." "No, I've been removing the man who was deciding for you. There's a difference." I looked at him across the table. This man who'd watched me for months, who'd paid for hotel rooms and filed divorce papers, and stood in Seth's office like he owned gravity itself. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you care?" Do-yeon was quiet for a long time. "My mother was married to a man like Seth," he said finally. "Charming, successful, cruel when no one was watching. By the time she tried to leave, she had nothing. No money, no proof, no one who believed her." His hands were tight around his glass. "She died when I was 9. Heart attack, the doctors said. But I think she died of trying to survive someone who decided she wasn't worth surviving." The weight of it settled between us. "I'm not trying to save you, Imani. You're not broken. But I am trying to make sure you have the choice my mother never did." We moved to the windows after dinner. The city sprawled below us, millions of lights, millions of lives, all of them indifferent to our small pain. "I don't know if I can trust you," I said. "Good, don't trust me yet. Just let me prove I'm worth it." He stepped closer, didn't touch me, just close enough that I could feel the warmth. "You're not mine, Imani, but if you choose to be, I won't make you regret it." I thought about Seth, about the 4 years I'd given him thinking love meant compromising until there was nothing left of myself. I thought about Do-yeon, about the 8 months he'd watched me, protected me from a distance, given me weapons instead of rescues. I kissed him first. Not because I was grateful, not because I was desperate, because for the first time in years, I wanted something just for me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was claiming something back, my right to choose, my right to want, my right to be more than someone's discarded wife. When we pulled apart, the city was still there, still indifferent, still infinite. "What happens now?" I asked again. "Now you live," Do-yeon said. "However you want, wherever you want. And if you want me there, I'll be there, but only if you want it." I stayed that night. In his penthouse, in his bed, in the space between the woman I'd been and whoever I was becoming. In the morning, I went back to Keisha's apartment in Brooklyn, the place I'd lied about staying the first night. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. By the end, she was crying. "You're a fucking warrior, you know that." I didn't feel like a warrior. I felt like someone who'd barely survived a hurricane. But I was alive, and I was choosing what came next. I left Seth's last name behind that night in Tribeca. I didn't take Do-yeon's. I kept my own, Imani Rose Calder, the name my mother gave me, the name that belonged to no one but me. And that was the first time I understood what freedom actually cost. It cost the version of yourself that thought love meant disappearing. It cost the belief that safety came from being chosen rather than choosing. It cost the comfort of not asking questions. But what I got back was worth it. I got back myself. The story of Imani Rose Calder And Kang Do-yeon didn't end that night in Tribeca. It morphed into something sharper, more dangerous, more real than either of them planned. Because 2 months later, there was a knock on my door at 3:47 in the morning. I opened it to find Do-yeon standing there, blood on his shirt, darkness in his eyes. "He's found us," he said. Seth, broken, desperate, and far more dangerous than I'd given him credit for. But that's a story that starts with a choice I had to make in less than 5 seconds. Run, or stand and fight for the life I'd barely started building. I chose to fight. And that decision changed everything. If you're not ready to let a Manny and Do-yeon go, if you need to know what happens when Seth comes back for revenge, subscribe now and comment if you want the part 2. This is just the beginning. Like and share if this story grabbed you by the throat and didn't let go.